All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Survival Kit for Beginner Developers. My name is Attila Wolf. I'm a Salesforce developer at Verba Technologies, and I would love to show you today a few tips and tricks that will help you jumpstart your developer journey. It will help you get into development, so you'll see how easy it is to get started and how much you can do with Salesforce development. So let's see what we're going to talk about today. Well, first of all, we'll talk about when not to use code. It's a really important complex concept in Salesforce development to know when and when not to use code. Then, of course, I will show you the tools that you will need. I will give you recommendations on how to choose the tools that you will need while you are doing Salesforce development. And last but not least, of course, we are going to do a quick demo. So I'm going to show you a quick example, a very small task, show you some code, and we will see how easy it is to get started. Okay, so when not to use code. As most of you know, Salesforce has lots of really great declarative capabilities, known as short for as clicks. So what I would like you to do when you're assigned a task or when you run into a problem that you need to solve, ask yourself this one question: can I solve this with clicks? Always ask this question. And if the answer is yes, it's probably the best idea to solve it with clicks. So here's why clicks are cool and why you should use the declarative tools. The apps you build with clicks, it uses applications that Salesforce already built for you. So these tools, you can be sure that the application is going to be easily scalable and maintainable. It's going to be efficient. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? So Salesforce already did that for you. And these are constantly being developed. Another advantage is you don't have to worry about governor limits. So there's all kinds of limits that you need to worry about when writing code. You need to watch out how many records you retrieve, how much resources you use on Salesforce's platform. You don't need to worry about that when you use clicks. And my favorite is the last one, is you don't need to create unit tests. So in my experience, I've done a lot of coding on Salesforce, and quite a lot of times it actually took more time for me to write the unit test code than the application itself. So if you can avoid that, that's great. All right, so here are a few examples what kind of task you can do with clicks. And the cool thing about this is that Salesforce is constantly developing this. There are more and more that you can do with these declarative tools. My personal favorite is kind of a new one. I think it was released last year. You can now mass update the related records of any record. So if you need to update all of the contacts related to a specific account, now you can do that with Process Builder. Back before this was released, you had to write code for that. Okay, so that's it for clicks. We are here to learn about when you actually cannot do it with clicks. What should you do then? So you need to get into development. First of all, you're going to need some new tools specifically for development. The first one might seem a little over simple, but believe me, you need to use two screens. So if you're just getting into development, your previous job didn't require two screens, it just makes your job tremendously easier if you use two screens. One for your code and one for testing what you wrote. So it's just very simple advice, but believe me, it's worth it. So you'll need a browser for developing on Salesforce, right? It's all in the cloud. Salesforce is a browser-based application, and you should be doing your development on Chrome. Chrome just has the best developer tools right out of the box, as well as there's the extension library for Chrome. You can download tons of really useful extensions specifically developed for Salesforce development. As an example, if you're going to get into Lightning component development at some point, the Lightning Inspector is invaluable. So you're going to be using these a lot. There's lots more. These are just 3 of my favorites that you can see here. But you can surf the Chrome Web Store, and it's lots of tools out there. All right, so this is the big one. Choose an IDE. So you will need to choose what we call an integrated development environment. This is going to be your command center when you are doing development. And I listed a few features what I think are really, really important that you should look for when choosing your preferred IDE. Code completion, very simple, but the various options out there have different levels of code completion available. So what I like to test with is exactly what's on the image here. If it doesn't complete opportunity for you, it's not going to be good. You are going to be typing opportunity a lot if you are doing development on Salesforce. So if it doesn't complete it for you, just choose another tool. Now, the log viewer, you will need to be able to see what your application does. When you're testing your application or when it's running in Salesforce, you can turn on logging. So if there's an error that you need to correct, the logs, you need to review the logs. And your IDE should be able to retrieve those logs for you, so you don't have to log into the developer console to do that. You're also going to be using version control. So if you are developing, especially if you are developing in a team, version control is something that you're definitely going to use. Your IDE should have integration with version control. It should enable you to use version control from within the IDE. Anonymous Apex and SOQL execution. So this is really useful. You can just execute code against your organization, against your Salesforce organization. You can retrieve data very quickly with SOQL. Again, this should be in the IDE, so you can test what you are doing really quickly. But be very careful. Be very, very careful when running anonymous code against your production organization, because you can mess things up. So best to use Anonymous Apex and SOQL against a sandbox environment, if you can. Then we have unit testing. I already mentioned unit testing. Salesforce requires you to write unit tests for all your code. It has to cover 75%, at least 75% of your code. So you should be able to run these unit tests from within your IDE, and the best IDEs out there actually retrieve the coverage data. So it will just paint the code lines for you green, the ones that you have covered with your tests. It's really great to see a visual indication of how much code you have covered. So there are a few other features that you should look for, but these are the main ones. There are lots of great tools out there. I am going to recommend one for you, the one I'm using for 2 years now. I prefer IntelliJ IDEA with the Illuminated Cloud plugin. Scott Wells really did a great job with Illuminated Cloud. All of these features are in that tool, and I really, really recommend you use it. Okay, so you have your tools. You chose what you need to choose. You have it set up. Let's go ahead and dive in. Let's see an example. I created a very small challenge for you, a small task that we are going to solve with import code. So let's see what the challenge is. We are going to need to lock records. So there is a checkbox on the account object that you can use to deactivate an account. So when this active checkbox is unchecked, we want to lock the account record, and we want to lock the opportunities related to that account record as well. Now, this locking is similar to what approval processes have, for those of you that are familiar with that, but we want to do this without approval processes. We want to just lock records when this happens. That will prevent edits on that record, and it will also display a visual indication that it's logged, and it can be unlocked by system administrators on a per record basis. So this can be really useful sometimes. So first things first, can we solve this with clicks? We just learned that we always have to ask this question, so the answer is no, at least not at the moment. It's always great to do research when you are doing this, so because Salesforce might have released new tools for you, but at the moment you cannot do this with clicks. So we are going to be coding. So this is my new favorite dream team, Process Builder and Apex. So you've seen Process Builder probably around a lot, and I talked about it as well. But the cool thing about Process Builder is one of the cool things is whatever it cannot do, it can actually call on your Apex code to do it for you. So you can use Process Builder and then call on Apex when needed. So that's what we are going to do. We are going to create a process that will detect this change on the account object, and we will invoke our Apex code to do the actual locking of the records. All right, so let's jump into the demo. Let's see what that looks like. I'm just going to close this. All right, so we have this process. I pre-built this process for you. But the last step we are going to do together here. So you can see that this process is running on the account object. We are checking for that checkbox that I mentioned, the active checkbox. So we are checking if that account is active checkbox equals false. So if it's unchecked, then we want to execute an action. And let's go ahead and add that action. So like I said, record locking cannot be handled by Process Builder yet. So the action we are going to choose is actually Apex. We want to call on our Apex code. So I'm just going to name this action lock records. And we need to find an Apex class. So we have this lock records class here. And we need to give this our code the information, which account you want locked. It's the account that started the process, right? So we are going to add a new row. This is going to be a parameter that is transferred from Process Builder to our Apex class. So we are going to use this account IDs parameter and set it to a field reference. And we're going to find simply the ID of the account that started the process. So this is the account ID. And that's all we need. So we're going to save this. And let's activate the process. OK, so that's the Process Builder part. Now we go to code. So this is our IDE. This is IntelliJ IDEA. Whoops. Let's see if it works like this. OK, great. So this is the code we are going to review. It's not the pretty IDE that I recommended, but we can look at the code. So I'm going to go through this line by line, so it's really easy to understand. This first line here, this invocable method line, this exposes our method in Process Builder. So this is why it showed up in Process Builder, and we could select it as an Apex action. Next up, we have this parameter here. If you remember, we set this parameter to the account ID that started the process. You'll notice that it's a list. This is because of Salesforce's batch processing. We don't know. It might be just one account that gets updated and gets sent into the process, but it might be 1,000. So we need to prepare for a list of account IDs coming in our way from Process Builder. And next up, very, very simple. We are just going to go ahead and use this command, approval.lock, on our account IDs list. Now the accounts are logged. So the account is logged, but we also want to log the opportunity, all the opportunities related to that account. So what we are going to do is we are going to find those opportunities. We are creating a new list of opportunities here, and we are finding them via an SOQL query. So we are selecting all the IDs of all the opportunities where the account ID is in our account ID list. So everything that's in the account ID list, we want to find all the opportunities related to that. And quite simply, we are going to invoke that same locking command again, approval.lock, but this time on the opportunities. So that's it. That's all the code you need for this exercise. Just one small remark. The length of the session doesn't allow me to talk about the unit testing part of this. Like I mentioned, you are required to write unit tests, but I can't show that to you. I actually wrote the unit tests, and you can download the whole application in an unmanaged package. I will publish the slides, and the link will be in there. So you can install this with the test test class, and you can review the unit testing part as well. And you can play around with what we set up here. OK. So with that said, let's go ahead and test it. So let's see what happens. We have a sample account here. I'm just going to uncheck this active checkbox, hit save. And now our account is locked. As you can see, there's this small lock icon. I am a system administrator, so I have the ability to unlock the record. But for example, inline editing is disabled for me as well. Every other user who is not a system admin, they cannot edit this record. But I can unlock it on a per record basis if needed. Now let's take a look at one of those opportunities. We have a few opportunities related to this account. So let's see if those got logged as well, and voila, the opportunity is locked as well. So this is how our small example works. As you can see, it was really easy. It used a combination of declarative and programmatic tools. Hopefully, you can see how easy to get into this. Obviously, programming it has to deal with some more complex problems, so it gets more complex than this. But this is a really good place to start. I think Process Builder plus Invocable Apex is a really, really good place to start. All right. So where to next? Obviously, this was a very short session, but I think there's lots of great resources for you out there. I really, really recommend Trailhead. There's a developer beginners trail in there. I tell everyone I train on Salesforce development to start there. It has really great content, and it really will get you started with development. There's also lots of great developer blogs out there on Salesforce development. Ben McCarthy at Salesforce, Ben actually compiled a really great list of all the blogs out there, or most of the blogs out there. I recommend you check that out as well. And last but not least, there is a great developer community in Salesforce development, and I recommend you check out the forums. Ask your questions, ask your fellow developers the questions that you cannot solve something, or if anything comes up for you, just go to the forums and ask. So it's a really great place to start. All right. Well, we don't have that much time for questions publicly because of the glitches here, but I will be here for a couple of more minutes. So if you have any questions for me or just want to talk about how to get started, I'm really happy to answer all your questions. So thank you very much for coming by, and have a great rest of Dreamforce.